Hey everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. This is Miles on the Grid, episode 2. In today's episode, we're speaking of Lukas Blakeley, a former Aston Martin Esports racing driver, a go-karter, as well as a Race of Champions winner against the one and only Sebastian Vettel. So Lukas, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, how you doing? Thanks for having me on. Firstly, it's I always enjoy doing this sort of thing, so it's should be good fun. But it's I've been okay. I'm just pretty chilled out at the moment, not getting massive amounts on as it stands. So yeah.
Nice. And thank you once again for coming on, because I know that we spoke a little bit on Twitter as to what we could sort of talk about, but I'm really keen to, first of all, just find out a bit more about you. So for my listeners who don't know necessarily who you are, do you want to just explain who you are, what you do, and what you've been up to for the last couple of years or so?
Yeah, sure. So, firstly, my name is obviously Lukas Blakeley. I'm a Formula One esports driver. I compete in the F1 Esports series, which is effectively the World Championship on the Formula One game that we all know and love over the years. Other than that, I'm a massive racing fan. I used to do some karting when I was younger. I love sim racing as a whole. I like competing, not just in F1 Esports, but I've also tried some other endeavors and platforms and championships, which has been good fun. I like to keep my horizons a little bit broad. I also stream on like Twitch as well. I'm always learning, so I'm like trying to build a bit more on the content side as well as the years have now progressed a little bit. But I've been racing, I guess, full time in sim racing at top flight, I guess, in F1 Esports for I first became an F1 Esports driver in July 2019. So ever since then, I've been full time, dedicating my life to this, and I've enjoyed most of it.
That's pretty cool. And I mean, what got you interested in? I know you mentioned that you started off with like karts and obviously that's quite fun. It can be quite enjoyable. What made you continue with racing? Is there anyone in your family, or was it just you watching on TV? Or
it's sort of, I guess, sort of the normal stuff where you're watching F1 on the TV as a kid. For me, I mean, I'm a massive Lewis Hamilton fan. I've looked up to him my entire life. I always will.
Nice.
And I remember watching him on the TV when he started back in 2007. And then he won the championship in 2008. And then there was also Jenson Button as well. So 2 back-to-back British champions in F1. And obviously with Lewis being my idol, I was like, I want to do what Lewis does. So I wanted to get into karting, which was like, because I wanted to be a race driver, and karting is the grassroots of motorsport. That's where you begin to hone your craft, learn the basics, and it's the best category to do that. Started karting in 2010 at the age. Actually, no. Well, I drove a go-kart for the first time in 2009 when I was 7. Because the whole idea, I think, was at the time I think you needed to be like 8 years old to drive a car, or at least the places we were looking were like even just like normal go-karting, not like a high level, but just even to drive a go-kart as a rental sort of thing. It was always, you had to be 8 years old, but I was so impatient, as you are as a kid. At 7 years old, I was like, I want to drive, please, begging my family, my parents, who have been watching F1 for longer than I have been going. But I was, funnily enough, born on the day of the British Grand Prix in 2001, 15th of July.
Nice.
And so, I mean, it's kind of funny because I kind of interrupted my mum and dad watching that race, or stopped them in fact. So it was, it's kind of, it's one of those funny facts, but also quite scary at the same time to think, I evolved my whole life around Formula One, and yet I was born on that damn exact day. So it was like, I was like, wow, that's weird, but but family have not been into like racing in terms of physically doing it, but they've definitely been interested in F1. And again, when Lewis Hamilton came along, it was just a supreme escalation. But yeah, back to the karting. Started doing it properly in 2010 at a club level. I went to my local club, which is the West of Scotland Kart Club at Larkhall. There's funnily enough YouTube videos that I've probably watched this particular YouTube video 100 times or something when I was watching the same video all the time as a kid. But it was Lewis Hamilton karting in the rain at Larkhall, because I knew that was the place I would do it if I ever got to do it. So I was always watching the same video time and time again. Of Lewis doing that. Started karting there in 2010, and I believe it was like Honda Cadet, so it was just like a cadet class for my age group to learn, and did that for the first year in 2010, learning because you're in the very early stages of learning it, you like chop seconds off. You start. My first race weekend I ever done, I was oh God, what would it be? I would have been probably 5 seconds off, maybe. But then from the first to the second, I believe I shaved off like 3 seconds, maybe. So it's like the evolution's very quick, and then you just constantly shave that time down. So in that first year, the time gap between you and the top just completely shrinks. But obviously, the higher you go, the harder it is to find the margin. But then the next year, I did some karting up and down the country in England, in Scotland and in England, and in Wales once as well. But doing easy kart, I believe it is, easy kart cadet. So staying in like the cadet class, which is my age range, which was the age range at the time, and got my first podium as well in 2011. Got my first win in 2011 in the rain at Larkhall at the end of the year, which was really nice. And then in 2012, I moved into like the junior category, which was a big step up because it's a bigger kart, more power, more grip, a bit more, again, just another level up. And then in 2013, I think it was second in the club championship and second in the Scottish championship for my class in the juniors, and the Minimax class, as it was called, which was then my sort of a progression. 2014 started well at the club championship. I won the first 2 rounds. I honestly think I would have maybe won the third one, but my chain came off in the third race.
Sorry to cut you. What's that like, winning a karting championship? Like, I've raced karts. Well, I say raced, dabbled in karts with like mates and family and stuff, but not actually being at club level. What's that feeling like of holding on to the lead or to win and be on the podium?
Yeah, so I mean, sadly, I've not won outright a full championship in karting. It's something that does annoy me even to this day, because I feel like, it's something that I would have liked. I would have obviously wanted that for that to be the case. I mean, in 2013, it wasn't too bad with, second in the club and the Scottish respectively. So it wasn't all terrible. I mean, I technically won the Winter Series championship in 2011. But that was only consisted of, I believe, maybe even 1 round. I think it was 1 round. I can't remember if it was more than that. But I won that race, which was the first one I won. So I got that along with it. But if you're looking at a whole season, I sadly never managed to get an actual championship, which annoys me because I'm very competitive.
Yeah.
But I do know what it's like to win in karting. That is something I'm glad I at least achieved in that respect. And I've been very lucky as well that I've been able to race and measure myself against a lot of highly talented people. So it's not like I'm looking back at my time in karting and thinking, oh, what if I didn't know how good I was, or like who I could measure myself against. I've raced against some very, very quick drivers, which I'm very grateful for. Some of these drivers that are now competing in quite high level championships, which is always sort of nice to look back and think that you had to measure yourself against some pretty talented people. I mean,
Yeah.
not to list an exhaustive list because I would be here all day trying to think. But I mean, you've got names like Sandy Mitchell, who I'm trying to think. I can't remember exactly what he races in, but he's done some GT racing. Gaudy Much, who's doing the Praga. Praga with Jimmy Broadbent, actually, which is really cool. Really, really fast and really nice guy as well. And also, I raced in the same class as Dexter Patterson, who's now doing British touring cars this year, actually. With Laser Tools Racing or something. I'm trying to remember. But I used to race him when he was starting, and he's bloody rapid. He won the World Championship a few years ago, I believe, in his class. So, I mean, I'm in that respect, albeit I never won, let's say, a championship, I'm grateful I managed to race against some really bloody good drivers, because at least I know within myself that, albeit I had to stop karting in 2015 due to the financial strain that it puts on, your family. I'm glad that I at least get to look back and think, well, I wasn't too bad. I did quite well. And I've got every belief in my talent as well. That's one thing I have to have, even now, being still a competitor in the virtual side of things. But, and yeah, I mean, it's been but when it comes to trying to, as you were saying, what it's like to try and compete for wins, it's the best thing ever, because it's, in karting, it's like, maybe these days, it's very easy to overthink on the virtual scale, but when you're karting, it's just raw. It's just bare bones, classic racing, you versus the next guy. It's tactical, it's brilliant, it's aggressive, it's the rawest form of racing you'll get. And I've had some really, really fun fights with a lot of these, not just the drivers I mentioned, because there's a lot more on that list as well, like that I've been lucky to race against. But just being able to go head to head with these people or just generally with people in racing and have some good battles, learn your racecraft, and then fight for wins as well, which is really fun. And it's been it's a really fun feeling for sure.
And I think with that in mind, has there been a particular lesson, or I won't say a particular lesson, but what would you say was the making of you as a karter or even as a racer? Like, what was your biggest turning point or thing that you've learned?
Well, I mean, I've certainly learned that motorsport's cruel because it's cutthroat. It's very it chews you up and spits you straight back out. It's not forgiving. Like it's very much very much puts a focus on life is not fair. It's very, it's brutal. There's no forgiveness in motorsport. Almost motorsport won't care about the emotional side or the sort of sentimental side, or you've put in all this effort into this, or you've put all this money into this, and all of a sudden you've got a bent chassis or your engine needs a rebuild. It's just left, right, and centre. It's brutal. But in terms of making me as a racer, karting gave me, it allowed me to do what I wanted to do at the time. And I mean, I owe a lot of that to my family, who, they are the ones that, sacrifice not just financially, very heavily, even just to not even to do, let's say, the biggest championships in the country, like the top championships, like, I don't know, at the time it was like Super One or NKF. These championships are just money pits. And the race, it's just unbelievable. And albeit you can maybe do one or two rounds. I never did Super One, but I did do like an NKF round one. Round one that didn't go well. But my point is it's very, even out with that, the financial, it's just non-stop. And even out with that level of sacrifice, which is already super high, it's also the sacrifice of, time, your own time, because, they're working all week, and then the weekends they're away at a kart track and wherever, whether it's in Larkhall or whether it's down south. And then all the time that accumulates as well, because it takes up a lot, and it's a lot of sacrifice, because they gave up all of the things that they wanted to do, so that me as a pesky little kid who wanted to go racing could go out and achieve that. And that's something that, you know, I feel like I would never be able to pay back for the rest of my life, because that's a lot of sacrifice. And albeit it was only between like 2010 and 2015 that I did the karting, I was very lucky I got to do it even just for that long, because it's a very brutal environment. It's not motorsport isn't cheap, but it's also not kind either. It's a very brutal thing, but that's something that, you know, you're sort of aware of in a sense anyway. But you just, when you experience it, it doesn't make it any easier. But yeah, I guess in that regard, it sort of defined me as a person. I was always about racing. It was, obviously you've got the key landmarks when you're karting, whether that's your first podium at Teesside Autodrome or whatever. I think it's Teesside Autodrome. I mean, an easy kart, the second race of the season.
Yes.
Or whether it was the first win in the rain at Loch Call at the end of the year. Or whether it was winning a really good race against someone, or, you know, just these sort of moments that build your racing sort of character. And then obviously the making mistakes and learning from them and having good weekends, bad weekends. It's just sort of like a baseline of starting your knowledge, starting your foundation of where, you know, your skills are going to be applied for the rest of your racing career, whether you do any racing or not. It's like that foundation of knowledge, and for those years, and then once you've got it, you've understood it, you've learned it. So I guess if that's sort of what that sort of gives to me as well. And then having went from the karting, then it was about, for me now, which I'm sure I'll elaborate on, is I had my years of karting. I learned my craft about racing there.
Yes.
And then it was about moving it into a new capacity.
So in terms of, and thank you for like talking about your lessons and what you've sort of learned, because it sounds like you built resilience, which I think is quite key for any race, whether it's sim or in on a karting track or on an actual track. But how did you sort of transition into sim racing? What got you? Because I know you mentioned that you've done not only F1, but I'm assuming things like iRacing, for example, as well as a few other categories. What kicked that off for you?
So yeah, I mean, for me, I've always loved playing games, but also particularly racing games. And with that, the F1 game. I've played every single F1 game every year since 2009. Nice. Extensively. So it's been a massive sort of passion and fun thing that I always done. I had a wheel that I've still got. It's in the loft. I've started my first sort of wheel. I went through quite a few of them, but I've got the same make of the wheel up the stairs, like the Xbox Microsoft wheel or whatever it was.
Oh yeah,
the Xbox 360. Yeah. And I used that from 2010 to like 2014, 15. So I used that type of wheel for that long. So I've been using a wheel even since late 2010, early 2011, whenever it was. So I've been on a wheel driving with no assist since 2011. So like I just turned them off. I'm just like, I want it to be as hard as possible.
Yeah.
So that was always how I done it, and I was always playing the F1 game. And even like when I was younger, I always thought like, you know, I always felt like I wasn't too bad at the F1 game. But I never did any league racing or like competed at these like levels or whatever they were. I always did. You always thought I was quite good at it, and I was always, I would say, pretty quick. But then, I guess for me, I had to stop karting in 2015. So, like, for a few years, I was just sort of like, well, that's racing done. Yes. I'm not gonna get. I'm realistically, albeit I never lose 100% hope. I was realistically like, yep, that's it. That's game over. I'm gonna have to do something that I probably won't enjoy as much than racing, because I was so obsessed with it. But then F1 Esports came along in 2017 for the first year.
Oh yeah.
Which was the end of the year, and I saw that, and I was like, that looks quite interesting how all of a sudden there's people in Abu Dhabi racing in the F1 game competing, and I was like, that's pretty serious. So I was like, that looks quite interesting. So then I wasn't at the time. I didn't have like the fundamental knowledge to be as quick as I needed to be to, let's say, like qualify for that. And I didn't know all the right things about the game and stuff like that. So I never like qualified properly for the first one. But then the second time it came around, I was like, right, I'm going to qualify. I have to qualify. I want to. This is a full effort. I was only able though to do the final event, though, sadly, which was there was 4 qualifying events, and I had to do the last one because my exams were all on the ones before. So I had one shot to do it, and I just sweated. That was around Monaco, so I just sweated this event for like a week or however many days it was, multiple hours a day, as much as I could, when I was not at school or whatever, just sweating this little event. Managed to get the second highest score, and out of it was a 10-person race. It's 10-person race, and I had to get in the top 3. And it was around Monaco, and I started second, so I was in an okay position, but I had to do 20 laps. It was a 20-lap race or whatever it was. Got undercut at the pit stops, but I was in P3, and I just stayed there to the end of the race and qualified. It's like literally the last entrant. So I was like, so I've actually done it, and that was crazy. I remember I was sitting over there after I'd done the race, just like, what the heck? What have I done? Because I knew I would be going to the Pro Draft, the first ever F1 Esports Pro Draft in 2018, which is a long sort of story in itself. Just going there, being amongst all the top guys in the game. At the time, it was just kind of like a surreal, immense experience. Doing the competitions, doing all the stuff which you can see on YouTube and all these sort of things. But on that regard, long story short, I didn't get picked. And realistically, there was no way I was going to get picked because nobody knew who I was. I was literally this kid who just finished these exams. I think I was 16, nearly 17, just like I got in, but no one really knew anything about me. And when you look back, you can understand that. But I knew how badly I wanted it, and I knew I was deep down good enough to do it. So I was like, I do not ever want to feel like how I did after the show finished when I was sitting in those seats on the stage, because I felt a sense of almost humiliation, not through a direct like an anger towards something or these sort of things. I just felt so horrible because I was in this position where I wanted it, what I felt like was more than anybody. I had so much passion for it, and I knew deep down this was something that I could do. So I basically, for the next year, committed everything to try and be one of the fastest people in the game, doing league races, competing against on the highest leagues on the PlayStation, which is what I had at the time. Managed to qualify again the next year, went to London, and then there was 3 qualifying races. You were in one of them, you were put in one of them. And basically I had to my mentality was, I am winning this race, so I am not getting picked. I was refusing to accept anything less than a win. And it was a one-shot quali with a 50% race, I think, actually.
Horrible.
Or was it? I don't know. Was it?
That's a bit horrible.
I think it was a... What was it? It must have been a 50% race. I'm pretty sure. It was a long race.
Which track?
Silverstone. It was around Silverstone. And that was the qualifying race. So one-shot quali, 50% race, Silverstone. And the qualifying wasn't ideal. I didn't really nail everything, so I got like P3 on the grid, which is all okay when you look at it. But I was like, nope, I want to win. I can't. I'm not accepting this. The time in quali wasn't that good, sadly. But at the end of the day, it wouldn't matter if I won. So then I'm on the grid for this race. Managed to get second after the first couple of corners, fighting with P2. So got into second, and then just settled into a rhythm behind the leader. And as the laps went on and on and on, I was just building the confidence, building the comfort, because it was a new a rig. It was just like trying to like same equipment I had at home, but a different rig. So I was just building the confidence lap by lap, time by time. And then it started to rain, typically for Silverstone, and I loved the rain. I love driving in the rain, and I was like, okay, now we're talking.
Yeah.
So I started to, it was starting to rain. I was on the slicks. It was getting slippier and slippier. I was getting more and more confident, and it came to a point where I was like, "This is mine. I'm taking this." So I took the lead around the outside of Stowe on whatever lap it was, built up a little gap, pitted, then had like a 5-second lead, and then I went on to win the race by, I think it was like 5 or 6 seconds, whatever it was, and that was. I was at that point because there was only 3 races, and if you won one of them, you're one of the 3 people that won. So I knew in that moment, I was like, right, okay, I've certainly done. I done everything that I could possibly have done, and I was like, if I don't get picked now, then there's nothing I can do. So, and then the next day, it was the pro draft, and it was a horrible experience actually in that pro draft because it was you're sitting in those seats again. So I hate sitting in those seats on the stage because I'm like, last time I was here, it didn't go well. So the thing for me was, and I was the picks were going by, pick 1, pick 2, pick 3, pick 4, pick 5, pick 6, and at that point I was a borderline nervous breakdown. I was like, this is horrible. I can't take this much longer. I need to know. And then it got to pick number 7, which was a Racing Point, and I got picked by them. And I remember walking down first I remember putting my head in my hands. I was like, I've actually done it. And then I was coming down the steps, and I just let out this like yes or something.
I remember
and that. It was a vocal reaction, but it was not even like, it was 10% of what was inside. I could have jumped and hit the ceiling. I was so pumped. You have no idea. Like, it was unbelievable. I'm very, very passionate about my racing. I wear my heart on my sleeve a bit as well. Like, I don't contain any emotion. I like to, not in a sense that I would get hot-headed or I'm emotionally driven as a driver, but when it comes to passion, I'm not short of it. I am really, really into it if it goes well, and I like to celebrate it in an emotional, passionate way. And yeah, that was that.
Let's talk about that passion, because I know, for example, and I'm going to skip ahead a couple of years, but last year, racing for, dare I say, Aston Martin, formerly known as Racing Point, you won a couple of really good races. And I think, for example, did you finish 3rd or 4th at Austria? Because I think you were battling for the lead at one point.
Fourth at Austria.
I remember watching it on my TV and I was thinking, crap, he's going to get it, because I saw you in the slipstream for quite some time. But when you won that race at Portimao, I don't want to say it wasn't passionate, it was more like controlled happiness, because I remember the cameras turned straight to you, and I think it was X-Tracks. I was like, Lucas, how do you feel? And they're like, yeah, it's fine. This is normal. Like, what? How did you feel? Because that was such a weird race in terms of, I think you had Brendan starting on the softs. You then had Marcel coming up, like constantly trying to challenge at certain points. What was that like?
So yeah, Portimao, I mean, I think to understand how that race went, I think you need to also, I guess, rewind a few races before with the first race of the season, because that was the first race of the championship, and I managed to win that, which was absolutely, I mean, that's the very short explanation, but I managed to win that one after a whole series of events that, in the previous sort of year, it was immense to actually get to that point. People won't really realise the full extent of what it took to get to that point. Because people don't always see the reality. They always think things are ideal, or they're idealistic. I had to push so much to get to that one. It took a lot more than just a few weeks of preparation. It was a full-on thing. So the first one was explosive. I was like pounding my chest looking at the camera, pounding my chest, which is only a few seconds of the reaction. I wish they'd showed the whole, like a minute or whatever it was, because I was losing my mind, because I'd finally achieved what I dreamed to win an F1 Esports. But then the second one, as you say, Portimao, that one was very different, very, very different, because I got pole position for that race, and I was pumped with that. I was like, yes, I got a pole, let's go, and I'm on pole, that's perfect. And then Portimao was it was the race that in the season that was the closest to perfection, because I led every lap, effectively, unless it was alternate. So I theoretically led the whole race, supremely quick pace, super confident, super comfortable, and I was like 6 seconds ahead of the next car on I don't know the exact gap, so I hope I've not misquoted that. It could be smaller, it could be bigger, I don't know, but I was quite a while away ahead of the nearest car on the same strategy, which was an F1 Esports. And I'm not saying this is an egotistical brag, because that's not the type of person I am, but you can barely break out of DRS in F1 Esports, and I managed to somehow do that in Portimao. I was in such a good rhythm, such a confident driving. It wasn't just about that. I mean, the car was working pretty well. Not always, it's never perfect, but it was working very well with the setup. And funnily enough, I was going into that race, and I was like, God, I hope the race pace is good. And then all of a sudden, I was genuinely like, I just hope we've got good race pace. And then all of a sudden, bang, it was a huge one. And it was different, because I'll get to the point, because I know I speak very lengthy answers, but
that's all right.
It was very, very different in the sense that, how would I say, I led the whole thing. Like, I knew the win was on its way. Unless I threw it completely in the bin, because it became quite apparent that Freddie wouldn't catch me with a few laps to go with the gap, unless I did something stupid. So I was in a rhythm, and it was so controlled and calm. So it was just different. Just happiness, but not like explosive, fist pumping there. But it was satisfying, because it was such a different type of race win. And I remember one thing I was really wanting to do, because I know I won once, but the last thing I wanted to do was make it just once. I wanted to make sure I wasn't just like a one-trick pony in the season. So I think to the camera, I went, you don't hear it, because obviously I didn't pick up the word. I was like, 2-time, let's go. Got the, it was like that and that. I've got a gif of it somewhere, actually, but it was like 2 times. So I'd got the second one, and it was a very different emotion. And it was so nearly 3 wins if it wasn't for Brazil, but we can get to that one later in this season.
Of course.
But yeah.
No, we won't touch on Brazil, but I think it's interesting to know, one, the mindset that you had in terms of coming out of that race, but also being able to control every single lap. In theory as well, as almost on the track. Very Daniel Ricciardo-esque, sort of like Monza / Hungary back in, I think it's 2018, if not 19. I'll have to check my stats. But I know you mentioned setup. How important is setting up an esports F1 car, or even, let's say, like any esports car?
Massively, because if you don't have, let's say you rewind the clock 12 months, in 2020, we didn't have the setup at all right. We were really poor in that area. And in fact, no, we were poor in every area in 2020. It was a fundamental failure. So in 2021, I personally made it a goal, not just a goal, but a demand from myself, that I have to absolutely make sure I'm doing everything I can to look for test setups. I put so much time into it, because if you don't have the right setup, you won't be able to get pole, because it'll be that too hard to reach. It's fundamentally hugely challenging to get the setup right if you don't have the direction. It takes a lot of testing, trial, error. It's one of the most frustrating parts of being an esports driver, because 90% of the time you're trying and you're failing, but that tiny percentage or whatever it is that you're actually finding things and it works, then it's absolutely unreal because it then just like progresses, boom, boom, boom. You found the direction, and the smallest differences, like a few clicks here and there in a setup, can transform it. It can literally just unlock that untapped potential, and bang, the car now works. Whereas a few clicks here and there, it didn't. Like it's unbelievable that sort of thing in that regard with F1 esports, and it's something that if you don't get right, you will suffer.
That's interesting because I think that translates quite well to real life racing. For example,
Yep.
like a normal person on the street would just go to inflate their tires or release some pressure depending upon the road conditions, or let's say like doing a long journey, for example. But for yourselves, you're always thinking of toe, you're thinking of camber, you're thinking of
Everything,
for example.
and they all work together, so you have to get every little bit right.
Gosh, it does put it into perspective as to how drivers like yourself and let's say people in GT racing and formulas like 1, 2, and 3 really have to actually think about the car and how it works on track for a particular day, as opposed to just jumping in like some people think. But jumping into a race car is an exciting experience, and I know you've had a bit of experience with that at the Race of Champions. In fact, you actually beat Sebastian Vettel in the Race of Champions itself. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Because that was awesome. I was watching it. I was literally screaming like, what is going on?
Yeah, I mean, even hearing you say that, it doesn't actually... So even now, however many weeks it is after that happened, it doesn't actually feel real. The fact that I was even at the Race of Champions doesn't feel real. It's like, nah, that ain't right. That doesn't feel possible. So it's absolutely nuts just to look back at it and the experience. And I want to firstly also say that I was just so lucky, not just to be there, but to also spend it with, really good people. I mean, it was like Team E-Rock, as I've sort of nicknamed it, I guess now, or whatever it is. Like E-Rock, like you had all the 4 drivers, so James Baldwin, Jarno Opmeer, Martin Pam, and myself. We were all, it was great to spend time with them, but also everybody else that was there, with the drivers, as E-Rock in general, and everyone from Race of Champions, and all the drivers treated you so well. They were all so nice. And you just think you're talking to anybody. You don't think, I'm just talking to David Coulthard, or I'm shaking hands with Mika Hakkinen, or these sort of things. It's absolutely these things that sound otherworldly. It felt so normal, so normal. Well, that one's a bit different, but it was just nuts. And then I guess, we had the E-Rock. Basically what happened was, when it came to racing Sebastian, I think it was the top 2 in E-Rock out of the 4 made up Team E-Rock for the Nations Cup, which is like all the countries, like Team Germany, Team Britain, Team Sweden, these sort of things, in the actual Race of Champions. So I was competing in the actual Race of Champions, which is crazy. It's just crazy. And we had 2 laps of practice around a shortened layout of the actual track. So the practice we had going into that was, let's say, less than ideal, because it was very, I had very limited real life experience in a real car. I mean, I'd done karting, but cars are a different kettle of fish. So it was very, I felt like I was like learning as fast as possible, like going from 0 to 100 in the shortest space of time possible, finding my feet. And in the rallycross car that I drove, the RX2E, which is the electric rallycross car that I drove against Sebastian, I had 2 practice laps in that, and I drove it. And on the practice, I was out of control like so many times. I was like, so much. It was a handful. It's a totally different style, and it's not something you just pick up in 2 laps. I was like, God, this is not easy. But then I came back and saw Jarno, and I was like, bro, that rallycross cars, it's hard. It's so much of a challenge. And it was then I learned that I was going to be racing the rallycross car, the electric one, against Sebastian. I was like, oh, this is going to be interesting. Because I was like, I don't know how this is going to go. I mean, I've had 2 laps to learn this car. On snow and ice, which I know this is going to sound dumb, but there is literally no grip. It's actually mind-blowing how little grip there is. I know it sounds really dumb, but there's literally nothing. So I was like, right, well, I was lining up, waiting to go on the track, and I was just sort of sitting in the car like, yeah, I'm about to race Sebastian Vettel. You know, I grew up watching Formula One, seeing this guy dominate for 4 world championships.
Yeah.
And this kid who's sitting in a bedroom in Irvine, Scotland, I'm about to pull up alongside him and go head to head with him. How in the universe is that compute? That's not fundamentally. That's why I can't process it now. It's actually ridiculous. Like, how on earth am I here? So I was lining up, and I did speak to myself in the car out loud. I was like, you know, your whole life's led up to this point. Just go and enjoy this. And I didn't want to, you know, I wanted to represent sim racing and all these people as best as possible. Because I didn't want to go out and get destroyed. You know, I was like, God, this is going to be tough. And I never went in with the mentality of I was going to lose. Albeit, I would never go in like that, because ultimately, if you think you're going to lose, you will lose. You have to think positively. So I line up on the grid. I've got Sebastian on there. I look over, and you just see that iconic white with the German stripes. I was like, what the hell's going on?
It became real.
And at that point, I'm like, cool, right, come on. Heart rate was stupidly high. But that's the fun part, is when the lights go out, because you had the ready to race sign, and then you're looking at the light, and I'm like, waiting. It's green light, and you just go. And at that point, it's just pure adrenaline, pure driving. It's raw. And I remember I can't remember like, let's say, as a video in my mind, but I remember the first couple of corners were sort of clean, concise, and then the minute the camera cuts to me, funnily enough, I have this massive snapper of oversteer going through sort of like a wiggly bit on the way to sort of the hairpin. I lock up the front brakes. I'm missing the apex a little bit here and there, but I was really messy, but I was managing to carry good speed, and the opening corners were okay. But from that hairpin onwards, it was pretty damn just like, right, okay, I'm going to have to piece this together. It went so well from then on, because I was carrying good speed onto the bridge. The car pointed nicely, and then it's insane when you're going over the bridge and then down, because it's such an intense run, because this rallycross car's got over 300 horsepower and it weighs so little, and you're on snow and ice, and all of a sudden you're just and it's like, Jesus, you're going so quick coming up to the line. And I knew that I didn't know where I would have been in relation to Sebastian. It was just pure concentration, and I had to like force myself to brake as late as possible, because you don't have much time to build up the confidence. So I'm having to force it in my mind. I was like, here comes like the start finish line. Wait, and then slam on the brakes as hard as I could. And then I'm locking up the sort of tires, and I didn't realize this, but you have to use the handbrake all the time in this car as well. But I was like using that the whole lap, but I didn't realize until I saw a video from the outboard. I was looking at the apex the whole time on the brakes, but the way the car worked is like, obviously it was going to go left for the corner, but I was under braking. I was literally pointing the opposite way on the right, and then I just literally Scandinavian flick it with the handbrake, and then carrying good speed, and then it's the final hairpin, which at that point I was like, confidence is coming. I'm sort of understanding more and more, and I just yank the handbrake, get it in, and then I was winding my way out the final corner. And I was like, okay, Seb finished. I was in my mind, I was like, okay, where's Sebastian? But then I saw him at the top of the hill, and I was rounding out that final corner. So when I saw him at the top of the hill, without hesitation, pinned the throttle flat. I was like, I'm not lifting this throttle. And I ended up, which I've got as literally a video I've uploaded somewhere on my Insta and my Twitter and stuff like that. It's literally I was flat coming out too wide of the final corner, and I was in the wall, and that wall's solid ice. It's like an ice wall, so it's or whatever was underneath it. I have no idea, but it's a solid wall, but it's covered with snow. So all you see is me kicking up every last little bit of snow with the rear end. The car straightens up a little bit because I was snagged in the snow, and I was like, if I've lost this because of this snow, I swear I'm going to lose it. So I'm coming out in the snow, coming to the line, just pinned, and we crossed the line, and I knew it was close because I could saw we went like that. It was so close, and I just immediately, once I finished the race, I just slammed in the brakes, and I was like, I don't know who won. I don't know one. I don't know who won. I didn't know who won. And then I'm just winding my way, like borderline, not panic attack, but I was like, oh, God, what has happened? How close was that? It was such an adrenaline rush. And I was on the way back, and everybody was on. There's like the grandstand and the railing all the way around. There's like the railing with all the fans, and then there's the big main grandstand, and all the way around, people were like clapping and like cheering, and I was like, what are they cheering for? I don't know. Like, come on, guys, you've got to give me information here. I don't know what's going on. And it was immense. Even just seeing that many people on a grandstand, and you're just driving back to the pits just to see so many people clapping for that the race that you were just taking part in. It was nuts. And then I came back into the sort of the garage bit, parked the car, got out, not having an absolute sort of. I mean, initially 2 guys came up to me who were like going to work in the car, and I was like, "Who won?" And it was like second by 800s, and I was like, so I lost. And then I went. Then I got out. Terry Grant, who was like basically our how would I what's the word? He's a great guy. He was just first of all a legend, great guy, but sort of like a teacher, like. Mentor, that's the word, mentor for like that week. And he just came up to me and he just went, "You just beat Sebastian Vettel." And I'm like, "What are you on about?" Those guys right there just said I came second. And he's like, you just beat Sebastian Vettel. And I'm like, nah. And I didn't believe, I did believe him, but I was like, nah, that can't be right. That can't be right. I was like, nah, I didn't just beat Sebastian Vettel. I was like, what just happened? It's unbelievable. And I was sort of like in a state of shock for like the next few minutes. I got back into and I just got straight back into the next car before I raced Mick Schumacher because I was just totally shocked. And I was like, I just couldn't believe it. I still can't believe it now, but it's a bit easier to reflect on now. But it was just such an immense rush of every emotion you could ever possibly compute.
And how has that changed your life? Because obviously, 1, racing in front of a grandstand, that's huge. 2, you're racing on ice with no grip, with limited front end grip and practically no rear grip, from what I'm understanding. And thirdly, you're racing one of the GOATs of all time. I mean, I'm going to say Lewis is the GOAT, but Seb's right up there, right? So how has that changed your? I don't want to say changed your life, but how has that had an impact upon you since that moment?
I mean, in the immediate aftermath of the race, true story, literally picked up my phone, looked at it, and put it straight back down because it was like, that is, yep, I'm dealing with that later. Yeah. That is like, not in a negative way, but like, I'd never seen my phone so exploded with notifications. And I was like, this can't be happening. I needed to go away, sit down and somewhere myself, genuinely just process what happened. I was just thinking, what just happened? What just happened? And in fact, that's exactly what I tweeted on Twitter or whatever. And what I will say is the amount of support and the outpour of messages and everything from everybody meant more than people can realise. Like, that was one of the most heartwarming things for me, to see the amount of messages, support, people that were invested and really like were happy for me. And it was actually just nuts. And I don't really know how to fully sort of talk on that now because it just feels crazy. But yeah, I mean, and as for now, I mean, personally, for me, it's been a very sort of a chill, quiet time because I've not had obviously I've left Aston Martin now, so I've now not got any. I don't have a simulator. I don't have a wheel. I'm not competing in any competitions at the moment, but that will change in the future. Yes. I will be racing in F1 Esports, and I'm very excited for this year as a whole, which will hopefully be, hopefully everyone. I mean, once I've announced my new where I'm going, what I'm doing, I'm really excited, and I hope people stay tuned for that. But at the moment, it's been very relaxed. But it's kind of weird when people sort of. People have said to me oh, there's the man that beat the Sebastian Vettel. I've heard that a few times, and it doesn't make sense. It's so hard to understand. And I did get to speak to Seb after the race, a few hours after. I never got the chance to speak to him initially, unfortunately, but I was really grateful I got to speak to him. Because he was waiting to go as a passenger. So I only got to speak to him for a minute, if you're lucky. But I just saw him and I was like, right, I'll quickly speak to him now. I just said, congratulations on, because they ended up getting out. They beat us in the out of the races. So he went on, and I was like, congratulations on going through against us earlier. And he was like, oh, you're I still can't remember every word of the conversation. It's a bit of a weird experience when you're talking to Sebastian Vettel. It's like, your brain doesn't always. Your brain's not running on full cylinders.
Yes.
So I was like, and we just spoke, and he's such a nice guy. I mean, he is literally the very humble, wholesome person that everybody sort of loves. He is a very, very nice person, and he was I can't remember fully what everything we talked about now, and I mean that's the honest truth. I can't remember every last detail. It was just a very bit of a blur, but I remember saying to him at the end of the conversation, it's like, and good luck for your races tomorrow, and or I can't remember what else, but I was like, he was racing tomorrow the next day, and he came second actually in the whole thing. He'd done really, really well, and I was like, good luck for the rest of the races, and I mean, I can't remember what else to say, but then we fist bumped, and then he went off into his passenger ride, and that was that. So I mean, but the whole experience itself was nuts, and even now it doesn't feel like it actually happened, and I would do anything to go back to the Race of Champions next year. I would get on my knees and beg. It would be honestly, it's such a great experience, and I would love if it was the first and only time I go.
Yes,
that's the way life works. But I would love to get another go at the Race of Champions. It would be more than. It would mean so much just to get to do that again. But I've got to. I mean, we've only just finished that Race of Champions. It's going to be a while before it comes back again. So, lots of time to think.
No, of course, and I think I know that you're kind of forced to keep things under wraps in terms of what's potentially next for yourself. But what we do have coming up is F1. It starts tomorrow. We've got practice and then qualifying on Saturday and then the race on Sunday down in the desert. Question for you, and I'll keep my one brief. Who do you see as your top 3 drivers for this year?
The problem for me is I don't judge absolutely anything until the first race. So
sure.
When I'm on live on Twitch, people ask me, "Oh, what team do you think looks good?" And I'm like, I don't know, because it's testing.
Yeah.
Mercedes are the king of sandbagging. And the thing is all the teams are playing these games. They do it every year. And personally, for me, I don't judge testing at all. The only thing I look at from testing is mileage. Yes. When it comes to lap times, I'm like, nah, I don't believe any of it. And people every year somehow still act surprised. It's like, oh, that's different. And I was like, well, it's testing. That's why. But you asked about drivers, and that's fair play. So drivers. I mean, I'd like to think I'm able to think in an unbiased manner.
Yes.
As much as I am a diehard Hamilton fan my whole life. I think if you're saying top 3, I mean, it's hard for me to not put Verstappen and Lewis in there.
Yes.
Purely, I mean, I do believe Lewis is I mean, he is one of the greatest drivers to ever grace the earth. Verstappen is a generational talent that, albeit you don't need to be a fan of the guy to appreciate just the level of talent that he holds. Like, when it comes to raw ability and speed, you have to appreciate just how bloody good he is. He is phenomenal as a driver.
Yes.
He's so quick. And I'm not like a Verstappen fan, but like, put it this way, he is freaking rapid. He is unbelievably quick, like so fast. And I would put, Verstappen and Lewis, like, those two we saw last season, they were just pushing each other to different levels of performance. It was actually crazy. But then I'm not going to put them in like a 1, 2, 3, sure. But like, it feels very cruel to think of, there's so many drivers I could put in that third spot. I don't know. I mean,
and don't say anything if you have contractual obligations as well. I don't want to.
No, I don't want to get it's fine. If I say this now, I speak freely because of it's what I think. But
fair enough.
But the thing for me is, I don't know. Like, if you're looking at last season, you have obviously George is now in the Mercedes. It'll be interesting to see how he gets on. Yes. Lando Norris had a phenomenal season last season as well. Obviously, those are the two British drivers as well. Charles Leclerc is another driver that I would say, in terms of raw talent, is actually mind-boggling to watch. Yeah. I think people last year slated him for absolutely no reason. I'm like, you guys are just recency bias. Bandwagon, and like, come on, Charles Leclerc is when it comes to raw talent, he is terrifyingly quick.
To me, he's number one.
He's certainly as well. Raw talent, he's crazy. And yeah, there's obviously, you can't rule anyone out because there's a lot of talent on the grid, but yeah, I don't know. I feel like I would have to split that third spot with a few drivers because there's so many. And I feel like even if I didn't include a driver, I'd be doing a disservice. So it's not easy for me to say, but I think to give you at least a top two, I think I would say, when it comes to the level that they pushed each other, Verstappen and Hamilton are just a different, they are the benchmark of the sport. Yeah. And I'm sure we will see others rise to that level because there's a lot of people that have the talent to potentially do that for sure.
I think that's so interesting because definitely Hamilton and Verstappen are 1 and 2 or 2 and 1, depending upon how people want to grade them. And I'm not going to get into a Twitter war.
Oh no, Twitter's shocking with it because it feels like nobody understands how to be impartial anymore. Like they have to be on their side. Like, I will stand by this even though it's 100% wrong, sort of thing. It's like, you can't win these days, but that's just the way it is.
You can't say other comments without getting cooked, is the way I'd be with it. But I think in terms of number 3, I'd put Leclerc up there just because his pace is, I mean, dragging that tractor for Ferrari, if I can say that, and Ferrari don't come after me, back in 2020 was ridiculous. I mean, he was achieving 4th places in quali and was bringing like fastest laps when that car definitely didn't deserve to be anywhere near the front. And I think with a honourable mention, I would put Lando Norris up there. Not his biggest fan, but I think he's got the talent and has shown, especially when holding off like Lewis in Austria and then holding off Lewis at Imola initially and then later on at Monza, that he can do it. He's ready almost, if I can say. He's sort of being primed to take that next spot. And then we've got people like George and Sainz and even Gasly. I mean, we can't forget about Pierre as well.
It's hard to single it down to one driver because there's so many.
Yeah,
it's tough.
It's tricky, but with that in mind, I won't keep you too much longer. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me and speak with my
no worries.
And let us know a bit more about you. It's been really, really awesome and cool, quite cool. Everyone, if you do want to go follow Lucas. Sorry, not Lewis. It's on my brain. Go follow Lukas Blakeley on Twitter. Do you have Instagram as well?
Yes, I have my Instagram as well.
Cool. If you follow Lucas on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, as well as YouTube, that'll be awesome. And please do support him in whatever he does next, because I know it's going to be quite exciting and fascinating to watch. That's all from us. And thank you everyone for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one.